I see that there's someone who on the weekends would regularly play Billy B songs about trees. Awesome. Oh, wonderful. So yeah, if you're just joining and haven't yet dropped in the chat, please just take a minute to share um, where you are and maybe how you heard about the session. And then I'm going to ask for a couple of volunteers to talk a little bit about what you're doing with City Nature Challenge. And also, don't be confused. There are two of me on the screen. That allows me to sort of keep track of the chat and the slides and everything. So I'm supposed to be here twice. And as I think most of you know, that I'm in DC normally. I'm in Minneapolis right now, but I live in DC and I work with the DC Area City Nature Challenge. So a few things that I talk about tonight are going to be focused on DC, but a lot of it is relevant to anyone doing City Nature Challenge or even really doing biodiversity studies, bioblitzes, and using iNaturalist. So you are welcome here no matter where you're from, and you're welcome to share the recording and the information with colleagues and friends in other places too. So before we get started, I'd just like to ask for one volunteer to start with to talk about what you are planning to do or might do with students or other kinds of learners for the City Nature Challenge.
I can go first.
Okay, thank you, Anna.
Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Kahanui with Capital Nature. It's a local nonprofit in DC, and on the planning committee for the DC Challenge. I'm going to be leading some walks over in Oxen Run Park for kids in that neighborhood. So we had a really fun walk last year for the City Nature Challenge. So I'm really excited. They brought, their families were out there. We had several generations of families. So I'm just looking forward to being with a group of kids and seeing how excited they get when they make their discoveries. Thanks.
Cool. Anyone else willing to share? Not yet. That's okay too.
I can share.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Kate, and me and my coworker Lisa Lee Sang are here tonight. We work with the Environmental and Outdoor Education Center, the William Schmidt Center in Prince George's County. And we are hoping to work with about 5 schools this year to support doing the City Nature Challenge. And then hopefully, if it goes well, increase next year our support.
Very cool. And is this your first time doing that, or you've done it in the past?
We've never participated through this vehicle, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anna, do you see the question in the chat? How do you get a group of kids? How do you advertise? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, actually, we kind of work with local friends groups of the different parks. So we collaborate with like the park that I mentioned, Oxen Run Park. There's a Friends of group. So we all have our own organizational networks. And then I'm also working on that particular walk with DC Department of Parks and Rec. So they will promote it through their channels as well. And then in my neighborhood, I live out in the suburbs of DC in Northern Virginia. I'm literally just going to put it out to all I don't have children, but all of my friends have children. So I usually lead a walk for families during the weekend in our local parks. We have a bunch of lakes and stuff around here. So it's just our networks, just kind of spreading, if you know people that are, I've just been spreading it with people with kids and people who are teachers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would say too. That's where actually the most luck I've had is just like word of mouth networking to recruit kids. Although scout groups have been a really consistent participant. So yeah, if you're just joining, tell us in the chat where you're Zooming from and how you heard about the session, and if you want to share anything about what you're doing with City Nature Challenge this year, or drop any questions in there, and just go ahead and drop questions along the way. If I don't get to them while I'm presenting, then we'll just return to them afterwards. So I'm going to set up my screen here to present to you in 1 second. And this is super informal, so you are welcome to interrupt me at any time. screen there. Okay. I'm going to see if I can turn on the...
Huh?
Oh, yeah, and just be sure to mute if you're not talking so that we don't have feedback. I'm going to turn on the laser pointer here. We might use that. Okay, so I'm not going to see your chat for a little bit here while I'm focusing on my screen. So if you want to ask a question, you can interrupt me, or you can just leave it in the chat and we'll get back to it. But so just so you know who I am, I'm, one second here. So I work in the education program at the National Geographic Society, and I've been there for about 11 years, working on programs to connect kids to nature in various ways. And a few years ago, I started getting really involved in our local City Nature Challenge, which isn't really part of my job, but it's so deeply connected to both my job and my passion that I was really excited to get involved. So I'm just going to share tonight a little bit of an introduction to the City Nature Challenge. And I know that in our audience here, we have kind of a range of familiarity with the City Nature Challenge, and including those of you who may be watching this later. I think some of you maybe have never done it before and have just started to hear about it and maybe just saw a post about it, and others of you have been involved. So hopefully there's little bits and pieces of all of this that's useful for all of you. And I've also included a lot of links in here, and I will send the PowerPoint afterwards to everybody who's registered. And there's lots of clickable links and hyperlinks in there so that you can get more information about things that you don't really understand when we first talk about them here. There's lots of follow-up background information. So what is the City Nature Challenge? The City Nature Challenge is an annual 4-day global Bioblitz. It's been happening at the end of April every year, and it's kind of a friendly competition in which we see which city around the world can gather the most observations of nature, find the most species, and engage the most people in the event. And it's been going on since 2017. I will say that during the pandemic years, we've de-emphasized the competition element of it and focused more on collaboration, because different cities have been in different states of lockdown or quarantine or ability to get out and about or to have events. So it didn't really seem fair to compete. So we've really focused on collaboration. As things have gotten a little bit better out there, we're starting to sort of enjoy a little bit of friendly competition, maybe between one school and another or one county and another, but it's still mostly about collaboration. And so you can see the results here from last year. 419 cities in 44 countries, over 1 million observations, 45,000 species, 52,000 people. So a really cool thing to be involved in, because there's people from all over the world. And I should mention that it's organized by the California Academy of Sciences, which is in San Francisco, and the Los Angeles Natural History Museum. And they started this as a friendly competition between San Francisco and LA back in 2017, and it has grown so much to include all these cities. And I'll also say, like, I work with some teachers who just aren't in places where they're near or they're in a metro area, so they're not in a city that's participating in the City Nature Challenge, and they have fun just getting their kids out and about and gathering observations during that period anyway, because there's so much excitement on iNaturalist, which we'll talk about, and there's lots of materials you can use. So you can also just sort of do City Nature Challenge in spirit. So I have some teachers I'm working with in Bakersfield, California, who are doing that. So you might be wondering, what is a Bioblitz? I called City Nature Challenge a global Bioblitz. So a Bioblitz is this intensive survey of a defined area, so an area that has boundaries, counting as many species as possible in a short amount of time. And it's important that we're counting species and not individuals. It makes it easier to do as a student or just as a member of the public, because you're not trying to count every bird you see. If you did the Great Backyard Bird Count, that's more like counting individuals, but you're just counting species. So how many different species of living things did I see during this time? And there's always a defined amount of time as well. In this case, it's 4 days, which we'll talk about the specific days. So that's what a bioblitz is. And you're basically just trying to find these things: animals, plants, and fungi. I should mention here that many of the photos and the slides that you'll see tonight were actually created by Anna Kahanui, who is on our call tonight and has done a ton of work to support our local City Nature Challenge and take some amazing photos. So these photos remind us that we're looking for animals, plants, and fungi primarily, or any other living thing. And the cool thing is that City Nature Challenge is a kind of citizen science, and citizen science is the involvement of the public in scientific research. And I'm sure some of you have participated in many citizen science projects. I just mentioned the Great Backyard Bird Count that just happened recently. You might also have participated in measuring water quality or water quantity or counting frogs. Many, many different kinds of citizen science where people who don't have a professional science background can still contribute to a real science project. And that's what the City Nature Challenge is, because the data goes into a database that can be used by policymakers and land managers and scientists. So I wanted to just take a moment here for those of us who are in the DC area just to define what that means. It's all these counties. It's the whole DC metro area. So I've had lots of folks ask me like, oh, can I do this even if I'm in Calvert County or even if I'm in Culpeper? And the answer is yes, you're part of our metro area. So you'll have access to this map when I send this out, and almost anyone who feels like they might be in the DC metro area, they're counted. Oh, and just want to highlight the website for the DC City Nature Challenge down there, which I'll mention again. But there are two great websites. You'll hear about these again, so don't worry about it right now. But there's a citynaturechallenge.org website with lots of resources, and then there's a specific site for our region, citynaturechallengedc.org. And these are the dates for this year. So the observation period here is where we want people to go outside and make those observations of nature. That's a Friday through a Monday, so it can accommodate a couple of school days or weekend days, depending on what kind of groups you're working with. And then there's a specific identification period where we try to identify almost all, or as many of the observations as we can during that period. And so there'll be some virtual parties to get together and work on identifying things that might be a little bit harder to identify. You can identify things at any time, but we'll put a special effort into it over those days. So how do we do the City Nature Challenge? How is it run? So it's run on the iNaturalist platform. Get that more visible there for you. So iNaturalist is a citizen science app and global platform. So it's a website. It's all free. Use of it is free. It's a way to observe and document and identify nature's species. And it's essentially like a crowdsourced ID system. Make that a little bit easier to see there. Sorry, I fiddle with my screen. And it's supported by the California Academy of Sciences and National Geographic, so it's free for everyone. And you do need to be careful using it with kids, which we'll talk about. But we do have some examples for how you can use it with kids safely, even younger kids. So this is basically how iNaturalist works. It's a global platform and a social network, essentially, where any member can share observations of any organism, and other members can add identifications or corrections and comments and questions. And this is a screenshot that I took earlier today just to show you the numbers for the current numbers for iNaturalist. So you can see that there's over 2 million observers, people who've contributed observations, and 90 million observations, and over 344,000 species. And that map is kind of a heat map showing where the observations are. So really exciting, tons of data on there. And the data that are confirmed, where the identification is confirmed by at least 2 people and are considered research grade, those are shared with the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is an open source database that many scientists and policymakers use for to better understand biodiversity. And that database has informed many peer-reviewed published papers. So these data really get used. But excuse me. Sorry, I ate popcorn beforehand, which was a bad idea. So all you need to participate, one second, is a cell phone camera or a digital camera and some way to upload your observations, which can be photos or sounds, which we'll talk about, up to the website or the app. So it's super easy if you use the app and you have geotagged your photos, you've turned on the location, you can upload them directly into the app from your phone. And if you're just getting started and haven't done this before, the first thing to do is download the app or go to the website, create an account. Very easy. And then you're just going to make your first observation, and this is basically how it works. You take a photo or several photos, or you record a sound. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you might want to take several photos of the same organism and put them all into that same observation. You upload it, or you wait till you get home and upload it to the website, and then you've made your first observation. And just remember that if this is new to you, there are plenty of links embedded in this deck that you can follow to learn more about how to use iNaturalist. And a really cool thing about iNaturalist is that it has computer vision or artificial intelligence built into it. So it's going to suggest to you, if you have submitted a nice picture, it's going to be able to analyze the picture and then suggest what it is that you might have seen. Sometimes it knows pretty exactly what you've seen. Sometimes it only knows the genus or the family. So it knows this is a violet, for instance. Okay. That's the very quick overview of the basics of iNaturalist. You can return to those slides or to other resources, or reach out to me, email me if you need more support just using it. But now we'll turn to some special resources that will be useful if you're working with students. So on the iNaturalist website, there's this great teacher's guide. And so I really just want to encourage you to check it out, because there's lots of good tips and links in here as well. And my favorite tip actually is this one right here, to first explore existing observations. So I know some of you here are already really familiar with the ecosystem around you and with the how iNaturalist works. But if you're new to it, take some time to look around, and there's some actual links in this teacher's guide to help you do this, to look around on the iNaturalist website and see what's out there, see what other observations people have shared, and just get a sense of what you'll be looking for. We've found that really helps people to have an understanding of like what iNaturalist is and what their ecosystem's like before they go out and try to start making observations with kids. Okay, really important part here. So there are age restrictions on submitting observations to iNaturalist from kids. So the first thing you need to know is that because of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, people will call it COPA or COPPA, iNaturalist cannot allow people under the age of 13 to create accounts without parental approval. So there is a pathway for parental approval, but it requires a $1 donation, because basically you have to have a credit card and prove that you're an adult. Having a credit card makes you an adult. So that's how you verify your identity. So that is possible, and there's a link here for how to do that. But that's not feasible often if you're working with a whole class of students. So another workaround that lots of teachers have used is setting up general anonymous accounts that don't give away any identifying information about a student. So if we were working with older kids over 13 or with adults, we would really discourage this, because it's an important part of a social network to have a real person with a real identity sharing information. Like iNaturalist is not just a database, it's a social network. So never use an anonymous account unless you're working with kids under 13. And there's some examples in here of how that works. But what's important is if you do that, just to take responsibility for managing those accounts, you as the educator then need to actively manage those accounts because they don't really belong to the kids. So here's an example this is the example that was linked on the last page of how that might look. So this is a Bioblitz that was done a few years ago by a school, and you can see that the the names of the accounts that have submitted things are all just anonymous, HCC6, HCC3. There is this funny one that's HCC poo poo, so somehow that got through the cracks, but it's still anonymous, so it's okay. All right, now there's a ton of information in these next few slides. They're really wordy, so please just know you can go back to them later. These are some advice for how to use iNaturalist well with kids, straight from the staff of iNaturalist. So number one, first, add identifications to your kids' observations, even if it's just at the kingdom level. So if all you know about a certain observation is that it's a plant, put that in there. This is a plant, this is an animal. That might seem silly, but it really helps then other people find the observations. Like a plant expert could come see the plant observation and help to identify it. If you just leave it as unknown with no identification, then people are much less likely to see it. So that's a good start, and your kids can do that too. They can do that themselves because kids can identify things at the kingdom level. Now, the second thing is to actively manage data quality. So every observation has a data quality assessment area at the bottom where you can vote on issues, like you can do a thumbs up or a thumbs down on issues like whether the organism was wild, whether the location and the date seem accurate, etc. And so please, if any of your students' observations look wrong, then please do flag those. And then very importantly, watch out for copyright violations. It's common for kids to take a picture of something they see on the web and put it up. Oops. And also watch out for inappropriate content. That's obvious that we see that a lot. A common thing we see is kids just posting pictures of other kids, which we really want to try to avoid. So just monitor that. And then they'll often label them as orangutans or chimpanzees or something. So just squash that. And very importantly, this is a little bit counterintuitive. It took me a little while to learn this, but don't incentivize the submission of large numbers of observations. So when I was newer to using iNaturalist, I would actually give prizes or points to kids for submitting a lot of observations, but that really encourages them to submit observations that aren't high quality, like of a houseplant or a pet or another kid or multiple pictures of the same thing. So just know that kids will respond that way if you set up that kind of competition or that kind of way of giving a grade. So rather than that, say you could have something like, you'll get full credit if you submit a photo of something in the animal kingdom, something in the plant kingdom, etc., a predator, a prey, scavenger. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things you can do along those lines, but just don't make their performance based on the number of observations that they submit. Okay, so then also we want to just remember to emphasize what to do rather than what not to do. That's a lesson learned for me too. Like if you tell kids, don't take pictures of pets, they'll take pictures of pets. So instead shifting to talk about what you do want to do, which is taking pictures of nature and wildlife. Taking identifiable photos. So a common thing we see with kids is that they take a picture of a tree that's far away or a bird that's far away. I also have some of these observations in my account. So we really want to help them understand that you want to fill the frame and even consider using paper frames to help younger kids focus in. So really to understand what it means to get your observation filling a whole frame and learning how to use a camera's zoom. And then another thing that's been really useful for me and for other educators is doing a demonstration or a screen share about how to use the smartphone camera, how to really use the features that it offers if your kids are using a smartphone camera or a tablet camera, using focus, adjusting the light level and zoom, and anything else that seems useful. So we also want to encourage what I mentioned earlier, taking multiple photos of the same thing and putting them all into the same observation. So you want to take pictures from different angles, top, bottom, side, front, back, or different features. And for plants, it's especially important to take pictures of the flowers or fruit and the leaves. And then you just want to be sure that you add these all to the same observation. You don't want to create different observations, just different photos. You can add many different photos to the same observation. So if students do make observations of garden plants or house plants, remind them to make sure to mark these as captive or cultivated. Discourage it, but if they do, you can mark them as captive or cultivated. And then also show them in the app. It's pretty easy once you open up the app. In the observation, you can have them obscure the location. So that's important when you're protecting their privacy, especially if they're at home or anywhere where you don't want the public to know where they are. That obscured I obscure a location when it's in my yard. Otherwise, it's just so easy to tell where I live by looking at my iNaturalist observations. Okay, a few demos here, some nice pictures provided by Anna and others. So yeah, when you're trying to figure out an animal, you want to mark an animal when it's captive, or as I mentioned earlier, or determine whether it's wild. So in this case, there's a fox in a yard, but even though that fox is in your yard, that is a wild animal, obviously. And then this is Anna's dog, and even though she might think she's wild, she's not. So be sure to mark her as captive. Plants can be a little bit trickier in this regard. So these are all wild plants. The one over here, this Philadelphia Fleabane, doesn't look wild because it is growing in a crack in the sidewalk or in a median strip. But if it's growing without the help of humans, then it's wild, no matter where it's showing up. So because I live right in a very urban area in Capitol Hill, I take a lot of photos, just literally of the things growing in the cracks in the sidewalk or in the cobblestones. It was kind of fun in 2020 when I was really not leaving my neighborhood at all because we were quarantining. I really noticed so much that was just growing right in my very, very urban neighborhood. These are some examples of cultivated plants that you'd want to market as cultivated. Now, sometimes it's easy to identify something based on one photo, like these wonderful examples, but sometimes, as I mentioned before, you want to submit more than one photo for your iNaturalist observation. So this is a great skill for kids to learn how to help with identification by taking multiple pictures of the same thing: leaves, fruits, bark, a picture of the whole shape of a tree. This is really true for a lot of trees. Multiple pictures are better. Mushrooms are another example where this is really critical. You need multiple angles. I personally have submitted lots of mushroom photos that are impossible to identify because it's just the top, and you really want to be able to see the gills underneath and see the stem and the base. So this can be a really fun activity to do with kids to get them to look more closely, and using a mirror to see the underside of the mushroom is a brilliant idea. And also a flashlight, which can be a great tool to bring along with you. So you can, if you're taking a picture of the underside of the mushroom, you can use a flashlight to get a better photo. And be sure to have the kids look for things on plants, like this lady beetle, or these tar spots, lots of plant pathogens you can find, and galls. So really hone those observation skills. And this is one of my favorites to have kids look for, is signs of life. And these are all qualify as good iNaturalist observations. So you can document wild animals through skeletons, carcasses, skins, eggs, nests, hives, feathers, footprints and tracks, poop, of course, or frass, body parts left behind. So be sure to have your kids look for these things. And then a quick promo for the idea of using a macro lens of some kind on your camera. So this is one of my favorite kinds called Easy Macro, which is just like a rubber band that you can put over your camera lens. But clip-ons actually work really well too, and they're pretty easy. This one is, the brand is literally Easy Macro, but you can also just find clip-ons on Amazon or other similar stores. They're pretty cheap. And nowadays, iNaturalist can accept audio songs and sounds and songs. So frog calls and bird calls, insects, and I've actually gotten some of my calls identified, which has been really fun. Now, just to promote Seek, some of you may have used Seek in the past. Seek is another app built by the iNaturalist team. It uses the same database and technology as iNaturalist, but it's built for kids, although a lot of adults love it too, and it's really great for beginners or anyone. Like, I truly love Seek myself. So the reason it's good for kids is that it does not automatically post observations to iNaturalist, so it keeps kids safe. You can set it up so that it will post your observations to iNaturalist, but it doesn't do that automatically. So it doesn't give away any privacy concerns. And it also has tools built in, like automated species identification and some nature journaling tools and some other stuff that I'll show you. So this slide, if the video is working for you, this slide shows how it works. The computer vision camera, where as you get closer to an organism, it identifies it to a finer and finer grain. This slide also has some nice screenshots of badges that you can get on Seek and some of the information you can get about the things that you see. And here's some more screenshots to show some of the other great features. So one of my favorites is this one over here under the Explore title, that Seek will show you the common organisms in your area so that you can know what to look for, your kids know what to look for. They also have these cool challenges every month that you can earn special badges for completing the challenge, and lots of other kinds of badges for different achievements, and all of this information baked in. So it's a great teaching tool. So I love to promote Seek in the context of City Nature Challenge because some kids are just too young, or the setup isn't good for them to use iNaturalist, but you want them to have the experience of what it's like to be part of this really cool global BioBlitz. And so you can have kids use Seek. So their data may not get actually shared with the City Nature Challenge, but if you don't set that up because you're trying to keep their information private, but they can still do all the activities. They can still be part of a BioBlitz, discovering things and identifying things along the way. So they can learn all those skills even if they're not sharing their data. So, question I get a lot that you're probably thinking now, what if the kids don't have smartphones? So a few examples, and then maybe some of you have a few answers, but if others have suggestions, we'll look at them later. I see some chats coming in, so I'll get to those after I get through these slides, and there are not that many more slides. But number one important thing to remember, you don't need internet connectivity to use iNaturalist or Seek in the field. So why that's important is, first of all, if you're paying for data and worried about that, then you can turn your data off. Don't need to worry about that while you're in the field, and for anyone using these tools in the field. But also, so I've worked with a lot of schools where they have school tablets they can use, and they don't have cell service, so they're not connected when they're out in the field, but they have Wi-Fi, so you can bring the tablet back to the school and upload all of your observations that are recorded in the app. You can upload them once to the cloud and the website once you get back into Wi-Fi range. So that's one option. Also, if they have a digital camera, you can upload photos directly to the website. The camera may not have a GPS, so then you'll need to record where you take the photos, but that's a really cool activity to do with kids as well, if you have a map of where you'll be and have them make recordings of where they take each photo, or make marks where they take each photo and then enter that into the website. Working at National Geographic, I love teaching kids geography skills, so that's an added benefit here. And if they don't have a phone or camera, one thing they can do, which we'll talk more about, is actually just looking at the data on the website. You can really enjoy iNaturalist and learn a lot from it, even if you can't contribute data, just by looking at the existing data. There's so much information there, maps and photos and trends, You can download data too. It's all open source and available to everyone. And you can also create a paper version of a scavenger hunt to find common species in the area based on iNaturalist. So you might go onto the iNaturalist site, look at the City Nature Challenge from last year, for instance, in the DC area or wherever you are, and then make a scavenger hunt based on things that were commonly seen, and then your kids can use a paper scavenger hunt to find those things, and then they'll be out there seeing those same cool things, which some educators opt to do this kind of activity anyway, of course, because they want their kids off the screen sometimes. And I'll show you a couple more resources we have to support that kind of stuff. So, come on. Here I just wanted to put the websites up again. The citynaturechallenge.org, which is the main site that's shared, that supports all the city nature challenges all over the world. And then our special City Nature Challenge DC.org site. And even if you're not in DC, you can go onto that site. There's some cool resources there. There's a lot of events and so forth that are specific to our region, but you're welcome to check it out and be inspired by everything we're doing in DC. But we're going to look at citynaturechallenge.org first here. And I just want to highlight that there is this education toolkit. I hope you see that in the top menu up there. Here we go. There's an education toolkit on that site. And you can see that there are lesson plans and activities for lots of different age groups that you can just download. It's all free, so just go ahead, download those and use them as much as you'd like. And then there's also, as part of that toolkit, there's a PDF educator guide and a guide to iNaturalist. Some of these things go over what I went through very quickly tonight, so be sure to check those out. Share these with other educators. And then, of course, I have to do a little promo for National Geographic, because we have created a lot of educational resources to support anyone doing bioblitzes, including the City Nature Challenge. You can see our website up there, natgeoed.org/bioblitz. All free, all the stuff too. And I especially wanted to highlight this activity, and there are a few others like this on our site. This is all about analyzing BioBlitz data, because we have found that kids learn so much more if they actually look at their data after they collect data. So it might be really fun and illuminating to go out and collect data in the field, but then you really want to actually learn from those data. So hopefully this activity and some of our other activities will help with that. There's also more activities like this in the City Nature Challenge Toolkit, Education Toolkit. But just be sure to check out everything we have. And I wanted to just show one example of the value of digging into the data itself on the website, or using some of these tools I've just showed you. Like here's a species that I see a lot in Capitol Hill where I live, which is red dead nettle. And here's one of my observations from 2020. And just a cool thing you can see is that right away you see a map of distribution of red dead nettle all around the area, and then you can click on the name of the species and you'll see a chart of seasonality there, and then you can also see where the species is showing up all over the world. So there's a lot of richness in the iNaturalist website to learn from. But also we have other activities, fun activities on that Nat Geo website. Like this is a Bio Bingo and Blitz Bingo that we developed. So the last couple of years, we developed a lot of activities to help families do City Nature Challenge and bioblitzes at home when their kids weren't going to school and weren't going to camp and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of like downloadable activities we've put up on the site now that might be fun. And this Bioblitz Bingo is kind of like that scavenger hunt idea that I described earlier, where you can find observations in different places to cross off squares and the Bio Bingo or Blitz Bingo. And that's just part of these activity guides that we've developed. This is also on our website. So lots of stuff there for you to dig into and use that might support the City Nature Challenge or other bioblitzes. And then just stepping back to our City Nature Challenge DC website, I wanted to just highlight some of the resources we have there. So there's an events page that we're just starting to populate for this upcoming year, but there's some examples listed from last year, so you can see the kind of things that we did last year. I think there will be a lot more this year because we're feeling safer and getting out and about and gathering in groups. And then there's also this resources page, which has some of the same resources I already listed, but then some other resources on here as well, including some other good recordings of webinars we've done in the past couple of years that might be helpful. So again, available to anyone who wants to check it out. And this is my last slide, second to last slide, just to encourage you to get out there. Look at all these people having so much fun, and we just hope to have more people and more kids getting out there. We're like, the most important thing to me and to most of the City Nature Challenge organizers is that we get more people outside enjoying nature. It's great that we get a lot of observations, but the most important thing is that we connect people to nature and that people walk away feeling a great sense of appreciation for the nature we have, even in our cities. And I'll put this contact slide up for a minute so you can know how to reach me, but you'll get the deck too, so you'll be able to have my contact information at your fingertips as well. And now I am going to stop sharing in just a minute here, and then we'll take a look at questions and share ideas. Okay. Let's see here. I'm looking at the comments in the chat now. So
we have a lot of people that have asked for the deck, so it's really cool that you're going to share that, Mary.
Yeah, of course. So I see people, can you borrow and cite some of it to share with families? Absolutely, that's what it's for. I've already borrowed a lot from work that Anna's done, as I mentioned, so we just want to share and repurpose. I think that's okay, Anna. Is that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, we've all worked together over the last couple of years to compile decks. We've all given these types of presentations, and we keep adding to them with our own personal stuff. And it's a work of love of our group, So yeah, we love sharing it.
Yeah. So absolutely. And let's see. So once somebody says, I use one teacher account and change my password after the lesson so students cannot upload after the lesson. I then check all the photos for no people in them. Okay, great modeling of exactly how it works to monitor your kids and keep them safe on iNaturalist. Oh, and Anna, you're saying you like to call it a census of nearby nature. Yeah, that's perfect.
I kind of feel like it's just like a little easier to digest in brain sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great, I know, because it can be a very wordy definition to understand. Yeah. Once you do it, it's really fun. A census of nearby nature. Perfect. All right. Does anyone have either any questions or anything that's been really successful that you'd love to share with others?
I just had a question.
Yeah.
So I think I read somewhere when I was prepping that you can't use Seek, but now it sounds like you could, as long as is it just something in the settings that you allow Seek to upload to iNaturalist? Because my students are mostly 14, so yeah. I think I'd be okay with that.
Yes. Yeah,
so it's just a setting within the Seek app, because I think my students know how to use Seek, but I've never taught them. I've never used iNaturalist, so I have to play around with it a lot myself. But I'm sure Seek is very user friendly. So I think that would be huge if I could just have them. Is it just like a toggle switch or something where they're allowing it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's just a place.
Perfect.
You allow it to connect to your iNaturalist account. So it means they need to have iNaturalist accounts set up. So that's the one tricky thing, is like they probably should go to the website and set up
sure.
if they don't have them. But then they can link their Seek to their iNaturalist account.
Sure. I also wonder if we could do something where before the 29th, I wonder if I could have my classes split and half use Seek and half use iNaturalist and do a couple of practice runs, like dry runs, and just see what we get for data and see and have kids teach each other and just I think we have to do a lot of testing it out before we get to the real date.
Yeah. First of all, I think that's a wonderful idea. If you have the time to do the testing.
More time outside.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And and I think that's also really cool. I would love to hear back if like to see if there's a difference between using iNaturalist in the field versus using Seek in the field. I do use Seek a lot even when I'm doing a Bioblitz or City Nature Challenge, partly because it's just the instant gratification of when the computer vision is telling you what it is can be so satisfying. It can be very disappointing when it doesn't know what it is, but often it does. So that's a great idea. And I'll just share a little tidbit of data so back in 2016, we did a whole year of Bioblitzes. National Geographic sponsored Bioblitzes all over the country and worked with the National Park Service. So we did Bioblitzes in different parks all over the country. So, and we did some serious evaluation with professional evaluators and to see like what worked and what didn't work and what was most engaging. One thing we learned is that for some of the teachers who participated in some of these events, we were able to do these like 4-hour-long training sessions before they took their kids out into the field for a Bioblitz. And the training sessions were mostly about like getting familiar with iNaturalist. And the really interesting thing was that then when we measured student outcomes for those teachers versus teachers who didn't have that kind of training, the students learned a lot more and had a much more positive experience. So I think that just demonstrated that the teacher who's had a bit of time to get familiar with the technology, the student outcomes are really incredible. So like the payoff of spending a few hours getting familiar with it is really, really high, which is kind of intuitive, but proved out by the data. So
that's good to know for sure.
Yeah, so I would just encourage I love your idea that you're going to give your kids a bunch of practice time, but even if you don't have the luxury to do that in your classroom or whichever group you're working with, you can just, if you do it, it will probably benefit your students a lot. That your level.
I think so. I think the more that I can do it, the better.
Right.
Mary, can I offer that all of us have, like I said, done trainings on iNaturalist. I've done ones that are like 30 minutes long for some people. I've done like more deep dives, like an hour. I did like a 2.5-hour class for the Master Naturalist. So we have all these different recordings of different trainings on specifically how to use iNaturalist. So, when we put those on YouTube and stuff. So what I'll do is I'll gather some of those links and put the time codes so that, it's like, here's the short one. And what's great is iNaturalist itself. I mean, they have put out like 2-minute videos on just like really quick little like how to do it. And those are all listed. If you go to the DC Challenge website that we've shown you on the resources page, there are a list of there's those links are there, as well as recordings of previous webinars like this that we've done. Like you'll see a webinar that we did in 2019 that was Mary, if you remember, it was for educators, right? Mm-hmm. It was it was like a different one that we did with so if you want to watch that too. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. So I'll grab the emails of all the registrants and we'll send out like the deck, like Mary said, this recording, and then some links to other resources for you guys, and feel free to share it, with your networks.
Yeah, and I'm gonna send out the deck as a Google Slides. So I just ask that you're welcome to modify it and use parts of it and change it up, but just make a copy of it before you do that, and then have at it.
Yeah, usually, Mary, before I share my Google Docs, I'll make my own copy.
Oh yes,
yeah,
yeah, but just so everybody has access to all the links.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in 2019, we had a webinar where we had some like a scout leader participate and someone who worked directly with families participate. So there's some cool information in that. And then we had another scout focused webinar last year. So those links are on the City Nature Challenge DC page, and some really good stuff in there too. So I recommend them. Well, I think that's a wrap for tonight, which is great timing. So thank you all so much for joining, and even more than that, thank you for being interested in going outside with kids. This has been my life's work, and I know it's a game changer for kids. It will affect the way they see nature for the rest of their lives. So thank you. And don't hesitate to follow up if you have more questions.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Bye.